You're not supposed to make any money.
Oh, I see. It's
Although I don't think they have an objection to it.
Right. All right, we'll talk.
It's just there's a lot of people who have, like, people that are oppressed don't have a chance to put it together to get into a business cycle. Yeah. Welcome very much to Conversations. A pleasure to welcome to the program Chad Ho-Dougatz, and he is an audio expert, and he's also a very interesting fellow. He has a connection to that eminent polymath Howard Bloom, and we met at an event with Howard Bloom, and Howard Bloom's one of the most interesting people, writers and commentators on the human condition I've ever run into in my long life. And he works together with Howard, and he has an interesting story of his own to tell. He has a greater passion for the audio part of communication, which is very, very much more involved than I've had a tendency to think about over time. We're going to learn about the importance of audio in the combination of mixed media, being video and audio. The audio part of it has a very important role to play. He's going to fill us in on that, as well as his exciting life. And Chad, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me down.
It's my pleasure. It was really good. There was a great event the other day with Howard, and Howard is a major a national treasure in terms of intellectual capability.
He is one of the sharpest-witted men I've ever had the pleasure of sitting across the table from.
And his writing is magnificent.
Magnificent, and his love of storytelling is also great. And also his love of life is great. I know he's been on the show a few times. And his love
love
of life.
We've been on all the time. We've done many programs with him, and he's written on a wide variety. So, but that's audio. That's television. We do television with him. But there's also an audio perception. Now, talk about yourself. You're interested in audio, and where you were born and raised a little bit, and then how you got into this field of audio massaging and so forth, and the importance of it.
Well, I mean, the importance is paramount. So I will say, and we'll get back to that. But I was born in Queens, New York. For 5 years, lived in Rego Park. And then at the age of 5, moved to Teaneck, New Jersey. My parents moved us there, where I had my formidable years through high school. And then went to college at the University of Arizona, where I went into college to be a business major. And about 2 years in, not even, about a year and a half in, a very good friend of mine, Jeremy Rose, said to me, please come down to the college radio station and do 30 minutes of sports talk with me.
Were you into sports yourself?
I love sports. I love being
athletic? Were you on teams?
No, I did cross country, and that was it.
Cross country running?
Running, yes.
Loneliness of the long distance runner?
Precisely right. No, not a very team-oriented fellow. And so I did, and I said, it's a Friday night. The last thing I want to do is talk sports for 30 minutes. And being in college, he says, I'll take you out to dinner afterwards.
Oh, well, then.
So you bribe me with food, I'm going to go. And
grog?
No, I'm not a big drinker. No. Although maybe back then there might have been a beer involved. Or a shot of something. And within 30 minutes of doing sports talk with Jeremy, I knew immediately that was my career.
Really? Talk to me about that. That's an event that really changed your life.
It was seminal.
And what was it that hit you so strongly, if you could share with us?
It was telling the story and getting a point across and speaking into a microphone, and the amplification of my voice. Say one thing once and it could be amplified or rebroadcast thousands of times. So it was the infinite ability to get my word out there. I think that really loved it.
I wonder if Come Here, Watson, I Need You by Mr. Edison was equally important when he did that.
I think it was.
The beginning of the recorded sound.
And I think every broadcaster has their beginning. I'm sure you remember your beginning.
Well, mine goes back into the dark ages, so it's a little hard to remember that. But, I got interested. I guess it was... it was the inspiration of Bucky Fuller and McLuhan and James Joyce.
My inspiration, without really knowing it, was listening to Yankee games as a kid on a small little radio in earpiece in the summer, listening to Yankee games.
Yeah, right.
I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, although born in Queens, lived in Teaneck. Teaneck's right across the river. from Manhattan,
Yeah.
and it is much easier to get to Yankee Stadium than it was to get to Shea Stadium.
No kidding. Yeah, right.
So,
it's true. Yeah.
And my father's Israeli, has absolutely no love of baseball. I love the game, so I would say take me to a game.
You love it from the bleach, from the stand.
From the stands,
not
yeah.
play it.
Not playing, no.
Oh, okay.
And I love it because baseball's a game of chess.
Yeah.
There's so much strategy involved in
Really,
baseball,
yeah.
so I always like that gamesmanship
Yeah.
that you see in baseball. And so I would beg him, take me to a baseball game, and so he took me to the Yankees because it was a closer drive.
Yeah.
And I always say, thank God my father was lazy because I became a Yankee fan.
What's the connection between Yankee fandom and baseball and audio?
So I was listening to games.
You listening to who was the one we had? We had a particular one who did the talking about
that was
the
Phil
game.
Rizzuto back in the day.
Phil Rizzuto was on the microphone. You would hear it over the radio.
Precisely, and he was.
We had a guy in Detroit. I forget his name. Heilman or something was his name. He was the one who reported the games for the Detroit Tigers.
You know, I don't know.
And that voice was all over town.
All over town.
Every saloon, everywhere. Yeah, it had yeah.
And really, I mean, baseball grew because of radio. I mean, baseball was the first game to consistently be broadcast on radio.
Baseball, good. One thing at a time. One base, boom. It's like a thing linear. Baseball fit into the audio world pretty well. Yeah.
And some other sports don't necessarily.
Basketball is very, very group.
And very fast. And
very fast. Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell the story of a basketball game.
Yeah.
Same with hockey.
Yeah,
very
right.
hard.
Yeah, hockey.
Football is nice because you have set plays. So you have play, stop. So that break in action really allows for exposition.
So you see these events in the world in terms of the representation of them being created in the media.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Marshall McLuhan's big thing. The Gutenberg Galaxy is a major book. You will want to read that.
I should,
yeah,
yes.
it's a really good book on that transformation from an audio world to a multimedia world. That's what we're going through now.
It's all media.
Yeah.
And it's the access to media. So, 30 years ago, very select few had access to even broadcast their messages.
Yeah, right.
Very, very few. And now technology and the means to get your conversation and your point out there has become so readily accessible. I mean, my 13-year-old son can get a podcast or a radio show together on his own.
Yeah.
Or can record himself on his cell phone, create quality video products and audio products on his cell phone, put it up onto YouTube, and could form a career out of that. And at 13, my son does want to be a YouTube star.
Yeah, right.
And to him, that barrier of wanting to do something and being able to do something, we had that barrier.
Yeah.
Microphones are expensive,
Yeah.
or were expensive.
Yeah.
Now your main form of living and connecting to the outside world, your cell phone, is a portable TV studio.
Yeah, the smartphone particularly.
The smartphone. It's a TV studio. It's a radio studio.
Another person could take the smartphone and become elected president of the United States using tweets.
And he has, which
he
is
did
shocking.
masterfully utilized the media to get the head of the world,
but
the leader of the world,
free world. But and speaking of Donald Trump,
I would say the whole world.
The whole
maybe,
world, sure.
But
do you think he knowingly did what he did, or did he stumble upon it with blind luck?
Well, I don't know. He works hard and everything, but he worked at it, and he went by. He bypassed the established media, say New York Times and that, by going straight to the people.
Yeah.
How large would a universe be with just tweets? If you have a tweet and you put it out, how many does it go? What's the pathway of a tweet that he used when he would say, "I'm going to be at this place"? All of the networks would flock like Hamlet.
Well, I mean,
Hamlin.
Because he had the TV show before that, because he is the name brand before him, he had millions.
He had a name brand,
millions before. I mean, we're broadcasting live, from the Upper West Side, and he had all the apartment buildings up in the '60s, right off the river, and his name's on everything in this city. Still is.
Yeah.
So he had a name brand. Now, whether or not he deserved to be associated with quality in that name brand, you and I were talking beforehand. I'm a liberal, so I'm not necessarily a fan of his politics.
Yeah. Me either. Yeah. No. Right. He may be in some trouble now because he's winging it.
Yes.
In a world where you can just wing it quickly without taking account of the context within which you're operating can be really tricky, because if they're trying to preserve that system of government in place, it's being threatened by spontaneous things that should have been not spontaneous.
Look, we have one government, as far as I know. Well, let's say we have three governments here in Manhattan. We have the city government of New York.
Yeah.
We have New York State government under Cuomo, and then we have a federal government.
There's some connection internationally through the UN
Sure.
and that. Yeah, right.
But
and that's probably growing.
We have one government, though. And for the most part, I believe that the government should be led by the best, who have the best interests at heart, who actually believe that government's a good thing. I don't want to go send my mother to an obstetrician who doesn't believe in being an obstetrician, that doesn't think they're necessary.
Okay, yeah.
That might not necessarily be the best analogy, but I don't want to send my child to a pediatrician who doesn't believe in pediatric medicine.
Well, no, that wouldn't be a good idea.
But yet we elected, and I say we as a nation did elect Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in government.
Yeah, right. It's really something else. It really is. No, and people, there's such mass discontent with the status of the overall system, and that would be private sector and public sector. They don't have a solution that seems to be crying need for an overarching systems change that doesn't seem to be coming forth from our intellectual, political, or any other class. And so there's a great deal of angst loose in the world, right?
Yes, and especially if you go down south, you look at the rural South that voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You look at Arkansas, you look at some of these, impoverished states,
Yeah.
where a state like California, our state, New York, really does feed the system and put more into the federal coffers than those states take out of the federal coffers.
Yeah, yeah.
We're
as
supporting
things are measured.
As things are measured. Educational, healthcare, Medicaid, the largest percentages come from these states.
The goods of civilization, really, or the status of a civilized order.
Right. And yet they vote consistently for the right. They vote consistently for the Republicans Party, who want to eliminate all of these benefits and subsidies that they're actually beneficiaries of.
Well, that's because they don't believe in the private. They don't believe in anything other than the private sector, and the government's just getting in the way of all these entrepreneurs who think they can just make the way much more. They're private sector entrepreneurial.
Sure.
Some charlatans.
Right. And they've been sold that's the private sector, and the public sector has been holding up the private sector.
Yeah, right.
But I know you and I met a few days ago. You've actually talked about the private sector's small. It's going to get smaller and smaller. Man-made labor, things that people make with their hands.
No, hold on. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Robotic.
In terms of the overall production, you got a private sector, but that involves a lot of instrumentation and a lot of kind of things that can be owned by somebody as a way of distributing, not a business model that can distribute ownership of an asset. Money comes by ownership,
right? And
so that private sector is a source of a great deal of the. We got 7 people whose independent wealth is equal to the wealth of half the population of the world. That's pretty much concentrated, and that's all private sector ownership.
And now let's extrapolate that.
So they want to do away with ownership. The left, since communism, would like to do away with the government, would like to do away with the private sector because they're all renegades.
Right. Well, I think you need a balance, right?
Okay, yeah.
And you say, 7 people controlling most of the wealth. Well, if you look at production,
equal to half the population of the world. 65% of our is military.
Right.
Okay. Anyway,
but the ability to create now, with technology, it only takes one person to do what used to take 15 people.
Thank you. Yeah.
It used to before. Look, I spent a summer in Israel working on a kibbutz. Right. And one of the grueling jobs in 44 degrees Celsius temperature.
44, to translate it,
which is about 112, 113.
Wait a minute, you die. You would die 112.
You're in shade and you're covered up, but you're on these farms in 44. They would pull you out at 44, 45. They pull you off the fields. But you would be on a combine. On this huge tractor.
Air conditioned, it could be.
This one definitely was not.
No, but it could be.
It could be, yes. And basically, the combine would go by and pick up tomatoes and put them onto the sorting belt, and the ones that were bad, they went back into the field, and the ones you kept.
Somebody had to sort those? They could be sorted out through them.
Now, this was in the 80s, so we did the sorting.
Yeah.
But we weren't on our hands and knees picking them out of the ground and then sorting. The machine went along, picked them out of the ground, put them on the conveyor belt for us.
And that's going, and it's not going to stop.
And it's going to get, and now, as you said, now we can have those machines that can now separate the good tomatoes from the bad tomatoes, so there's nobody even on the ground. So a job that went from picking tomatoes in a field, where you would need laborious many people to pick a field, because you would need hands and knees going from vine to vine, down the road, then went to a machine doing the picking and the human eye doing the sorting.
And that metaphor is now to be extended in exponential new terms
Precisely.
with the robotics that are coming now.
So
it's going to displace the labor input to production, and the left has had the idea of the labor theory of value. It's the labor that creates the wealth, but actually it's not that. It's being eliminated.
I'm going to go to the next step.
Within a couple decades, it'll be eliminated from the productive process.
Completely eliminated, and therefore I think
completely eliminated as a source of income.
So it's really important for us as a society right now in today's age
to get down to understanding audio. We're supposed to be talking about audio.
I know that, but
let's try to get back. Let's not go too far afield.
Right. But to put a button on that, though, Harold, I think it's really critical that we start using our imagination better.
Thank you. Yeah.
And really toning in and tapping into the imagination.
Yeah.
And what is next?
Okay.
And that is where America, over any other country, I think, has a really great advantage.
I love the country. Yeah.
I think we are the most imaginative group, collective out there. And
we happen to be the leading edge at this particular time in the evolution of universal consciousness.
Now, Japan, perhaps with robotics,
no, I think America's in the lead.
But we really
China's coming along.
China's coming along.
But the whole country, the whole world is coming to a new way of being.
Right.
And that's something that is like evolutionarily to be considered, not just political. Right. It's not just a political thing like the French Revolution or something. It's a thing that involves almost like a speciation that we're going to be going through in terms of the broader universe or something.
Oh, it's growing
and
fast.
We ought to understand the media by which all this message is getting out, one part of which is audio.
Sure. So
now, you got interested in that, so I don't want to, you know what I mean?
No, of course. So with audio, I will say this. Audio is the first storytelling. The stories were told via person to person.
Yeah, that's right.
Thousands of years, stories were told from person to person.
Wait a minute. Around a campfire, they'd be telling a story, but that would be multimedia because it's multisensorial. So you got to get to something where it gets abstractly audio.
Right.
You know,
it's
part of the technological development.
Right.
Because storytelling, you would be there. Around the campfire in a Cro-Magnon cave or something.
I believe everything can be stories. I think everything is stories. I think what we're talking right now is stories.
Yeah, okay.
I think everything is stories.
Really, that's
and
interesting.
I think when we tell our story, we're trying to enroll people in our belief system for a little bit.
You think? Oh, you think so? Okay, that's interesting.
We're telling our stories to enroll
It doesn't have a meaning just in and of itself, apart from the meaning of the words themselves.
Right.
Or the way they're, okay.
Now, some stories obviously have, you have your fables of, the Aesop's fables. Those stories were told for purpose.
Yeah.
To,
help the kid go to sleep.
That's exactly. if they were
they're
poorly
8 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
So back to my love of audio.
Yes, please. Let's get to that.
So radio, listening to Yankee games, and then a friend of mine asked me to do the radio show with him in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I just fell in love with the medium, changed my major, and got a part-time job at the local traditional commercial radio station in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. And was that doing sports, did you say?
No, just production, being on air.
Oh, technically.
Technically. And then they gave me a morning show, eventually, through a long series of events.
On mic, you would say.
Mic.
We say on camera.
Yes, on mic.
Yeah.
I had my own morning show. I was 20 years old.
Wow.
And I was doing morning radio in Tucson, Arizona, which was a good market to start out your career in.
Yeah.
Making $15,200 a year.
For that much at that young age, that was a lot of money. You were rich beyond
I thought I was.
Yeah.
But my family kept saying, when are you going to get a real job?
No.
Now, $15,000. Now, this is the 90s.
No, at that time, that would have been a lot.
Even in the 90s, it wasn't a lot of money.
15,000?
Yeah. For a yearly salary?
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
In the 90s was not a lot of money.
I was thinking you as a teenager, after school thing.
No, this was my main career. But I've always loved it. I lost that job in Tucson, Arizona, moved to upstate New York.
What were you doing? You were reporting like a baseball game?
No, just full on, spinning discs as a DJ, giving weather reports.
Wait a minute, you would really?
Yeah, full on morning.
On radio.
On radio, just like, not unlike Howard Stern too much, except without all
Howard
the
Stern is
crassness.
Yes. Yeah, right.
So that I did that.
And you were winging it. In a sense,
I had some scripts in the news that
and it was up to you to do the scripting and everything.
Everything,
and say 1 minute for weather, one for the traffic report, and that kind of thing.
Everything.
Yeah. And did you enjoy that?
Loved it.
You did love it, huh?
I
It really got a hold of you.
Harold,
right?
I'm going to tell you something. I've been in radio for over 20 years now.
Wow.
In radio or audio production. There was only 2 years of my life, even though I was in radio, that I actually thought I had a job where I not hated, but I was actually working. Like I felt like I was working. The rest of the time, I've been blessed to do what I want to do.
Wait a minute. Do you realize how important that is, what you just said?
It is.
I think if the world was such that everybody was doing what they wanted to do rather than what they had to do, it may be we're coming into that kind of a world, screaming and kicking because we'd all been trained that the important thing of you to do is to learn how to do something you don't want to do in order to get money. Is that not the pattern that you can see?
100% true.
Yeah.
It all started
now
when
we may be getting to where everybody could be doing what they want to do. Is that an unfathomable dream that we could actually have everybody doing what they want to do in the way that you felt that? Or is that something that never can be, for some to win, others have to lose, and all the zero-sum thinking that makes up human history? If you can understand.
Yeah, I can understand that. Look, I'm committed to a win-win world. I'm committed to a win-win world, 100% committed to win-win world. There is no reason anyone should suffer for my gain.
But they do all the time. That's the pattern that is understood by all the political leadership down through the ages.
Down through the ages.
Always. It's always been like that. So what is the difference that makes it possible that we can have something that we've never had in the history of the species, if that is the case?
Honestly, I don't think we're going to see that in our lifetime.
You do not?
I do not think that.
I do.
I would love to think you're.
Well, my lifetime's a little
and look,
short.
I have a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old son.
Right,
I would love for them never to work and to have an income.
No, wait a minute. Work is, if you work like an artist works.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
I would love.
You're doing what you want. They should be. Wouldn't it be a better world if everybody was doing what they wanted to do?
And as long as you're not harming anyone,
and also be able to have a reasonable, what is called a have-like way of living, rather than being deprived of the elemental material needs and sustenance and so forth, has been the history of the species.
I think that's a utopian mentality.
It is utopian, but utopian is usually done to dismiss it as impossible. But it might be. It's at hand. And that's what we're fighting about.
Look, we have Utopia Parkway in Queens. Let's make it real.
What?
We have a Utopia Parkway in Queens. Let's make it real. Yes, there's a major thoroughfare in Queens, Utopia Parkway, because it's a tangible thing. I think Utopia can be tangible. I think the problem is we have so many anchors.
So many links to history.
The anchors to history.
And again, did I say it earlier? If I did, tell me to shut up.
That's all right. I will never.
James Joyce, a great poet, he had Daedalus say, right? History is a nightmare of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. That's from one of our great poets. And he referred to it in lots of ways having to do with the audio part of the transfer from an audio to a multimedia world. So we should get back to audio. Well, because you're an expert, and tell us some of the importance of the right. Audio is so important, and it's given short shrift in most people's mind. It's just a thing you plug in.
No, it's
not. It's a whole thing, isn't it?
It's paramount. To even if you take your favorite movies, and if you were to have them poorly audio recorded or recorded with bad sound, that movie would be horrible. If you were to take your Citizen Kane, your Godfather, if the Godfather sounded bad, it would not matter what Marlon Brando was doing on that picture.
He was really good.
He was
fantastic. Yeah.
But if that movie sounded bad, or when they're shooting up in the toll booth, and if those rat-a-tats did not sound right, if it sounded
Bonnie and Clyde at the end.
Exactly. If that sounded wrong, your body would have a visceral negative reaction to bad sound.
Maybe that's because we're spoiled and used to having good sound close to reality. Are those sounds close to are you trying to get at close to reality with good audio?
You have to be.
Is that what you're trying to get to? You're not trying to get enhanced sound.
No, and you can't
something more.
No, you can't over-enhance it.
No, you can't. Okay. You're the expert here. You can talk to us
if you look at a film like Star Wars, right?
Yeah. I did the other day.
There you go. Seminal piece of audio, right? Even the sounds of the blasters in there, or the sounds of some of those animals, or some of the spacecraft flying, those are actual real sounds that were recorded from animals on the street changed or modified slightly.
Is that right?
They are not creative.
You were really sensitive to that as an audio.
Oh, and I've studied this.
You're an audio engineer, would you say?
I am an audio engineer.
Yeah, right.
And I'm also a producer.
A producer
of content. So I help guide a lot of shows' content. So at my company, the Hangar Studios, we have about 30 different podcasts that we produce right now.
Yeah.
Some are weekly, some are twice a week, some are monthly.
Yeah.
Many of them deal with women's issues. Many of them deal with the theater and arts. We have some, law firms that have shows with us, all these different types of programming that we create, and all of it's about telling a story. And
it's all storytelling, right?
For the most part, and conveying one story to another. But if
that's interesting.
But if it sounds bad, nobody's going to listen. Well, if there's a hum in it, if there's a lot of mouth noise, if it sounds bad,
maybe you're overly sensitive to that. Maybe?
I've been accused of that, yes.
You have been.
Oh, 100% I am overly sensitive to it.
Yeah, it's like somebody, had an interesting thing about Beethoven. Mm-hmm. He was a really good composer, right? And he created, this is interesting, I don't know if it's a metaphor or not.
Yeah, no.
But he created a symphony, I forget which one and everything. But anyway, he created a thing at a certain point in time when the piano upon which it was to be played was at a certain level, the invention of the piano as an instrument, right? And he composed it. The notational system, it was around then the notational system came in from music, We don't have no idea what the music of Caesar was.
None.
Because no notation, right? We had no way of carrying. We had no
the
recording device. We didn't have any iTunes, or we didn't have fast,
You're right.
Smartphones. So anyway, but he created it, and then there came to be a piano. It's a major thing for sound, right? Do you use the piano a lot or not, or
no,
the sound? The show business uses it.
Yeah,
but let me finish the point.
Yes, of course.
He started this, and he made the thing. He had a composition. It's all written down with those notes and everything. It makes sense to people, and it came to be like it was 20 years later or something like that, and there came to be an improvement in the piano, and it was the improved score, the thing that he'd come up with, the score that he'd come up with, put down on paper notationally, couldn't be picked up by the earlier one, but by the one that came 20 years later, the nuance of what he had built into the production came out because the technology had caught up with the score. Do you understand?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that a metaphor for anything?
Well,
or not?
I mean, again, using the Star Wars jargon, these last bit of films, the story had always been there.
Yeah.
Even the films that came out in the late 90s, the stories have always been there. They were never able to make them because the technology wasn't there.
That's the metaphor I was trying to get at with that.
So your metaphor.
You can use it.
Absolutely.
You can use it in your tutorials. And
absolutely.
Things. Yeah.
And so much more so that the technology, so like I said, we do podcasting now.
Yeah.
That technology, while it was around about 10 years ago, has really manifested itself with smartphones.
Why don't you do citizens of the world a great service now by filling us in on the podcast, what the hell it is, and how was it done, when did it come, what was its legacy in terms of the things that went before, in terms of audio.
Right. So I'm not a historian.
And we got to get to audio.
Yes, but this is all audio.
Field. Yeah,
so this is, but and I'm not a historian. And I don't
but
pretend
you're
to be.
Pretty good historian, if I would say so.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Podcasting's been around for about 10 years.
Okay.
And has really, within the past 5 years, had a huge renaissance. The first 5 years, it was a little difficult. You would create an audio program, just like a radio show, if you would. Think of it just
Jack Benny.
Perfect example. And you would create this audio program and you'd put it up on the internet.
Put it up on the internet on a transponder or something?
No, you just release it to a website.
Release it to a website, and there were websites that carried these things.
Absolutely.
It was an audio storytelling.
Yeah, so it's an audio file.
And you would hear it on a radio?
You would download it and you would play it on your computer.
You would play it on your computer?
Through the computer.
Okay.
So all podcasting is computer-based. At some point or another, a computer has been involved. As opposed to traditional radio, where you'd have signals and transmitters. You wouldn't. 100 years ago, when radio was really coming on, obviously there were no computers.
Wasn't 100 years ago even, was it? Was it 100 years ago? Or radio? When did radio come in? I don't even remember.
Well, I mean, look, Titanic was the first one to use Morse code, right? So I think radio
Is that the first?
Titanic. The only reason they were able to save anybody was because of Morse code.
Yeah, I guess
or else everyone would have perished.
I know the guy that was in the bathysphere that went down to see the Titanic. Remember the movie?
Of course.
When she threw the jewel in and everything. That movie. That's based on a reality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the guy, Lindsay, he's my friend.
Nice.
He's the guy that was in the bathysphere that went down and saw the Titanic.
Yeah, I could never do that.
At the base. No, but I'm.
Too claustrophobic.
And he was talking by audio to the people on the ship.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, no.
We're getting far afield.
It happens with the show I do with Howard Bloom, for example.
Yeah.
He and I
I'll bet you get off on all kinds of things with that guy.
We go. The rule for Howard Bloom's show. His show is called
Duck.
Howard. Yeah. His show is called Howard Bloom Saves the Universe.
Yeah, right.
So, but we go in with one sentence as to what we're going to discuss, and an hour later we could be in a different world.
No kidding. I can't believe it here talking to you. I can't believe that could ever happen with you.
Go figure.
I'm making a joke.
Oh, I know, of course. I'm playing into the sarcasm.
Yeah, right.
But so podcasting is basically at its foremost radio programming, talk radio programming on demand.
Right.
On
demand.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And so much so that
it's stored on a computer.
It's on a computer, yeah. So it comes down via iTunes.
But it's coming from a transponder?
Not a transponder, just via internet. So Wi-Fi or however you get online.
Okay.
Or on your smartphone.
Yeah.
And with podcasting...
Is that synonymous with the smartphone?
Absolutely.
The smartphone was a major thing.
It revolutionized it.
Yeah.
More so than anything else. Yeah. Now, there were some MP3 players that you could get your podcasts on, but the smartphone made it, available to everyone. And everyone has a smartphone now, for the most part.
Yeah. I don't yet. I have to get one,
You got to get on it.
I should get one.
Yes,
right?
please. I have a guy.
Okay.
But so with the podcast, what they enabled you to do, really, unlike any other media, is really narrow cast your conversation.
Okay.
If you want to talk for 30 minutes about your love of some obscure little piece of whatever, you could do that.
And put it there.
And put it on the internet. Now, that does not mean somebody's going to listen.
And can it be categorized in any kind of way that can put it in the old trove of all information?
Absolutely.
And how is that all done? By algorithms or what?
Through your distribution, the way when you distribute your audio, when you upload that audio to your servers, you can then determine what type of category it will go into.
But how is that all determined? I mean, how many?
Me as the content creator, I can determine what bins I wish to put that content.
Yeah, but you used to have a thing called a library. Remember the library? Do you remember? Did you ever wander around Stacks getting a thing a book from the librarian with dust on it and everything? And so they had a system, Dewey Decimal, and they had Library of Congress and a way of putting a grid on reality. Sure. How do they put a grid on the reality which includes everything, even the musings of some person about some very obscure thing? Who's put the new grid on reality?
It is
that way that you can have a grid that you plug it into.
The answer is we are putting that grid on.
It's being made as we talk?
It's being made by the content creators.
That sounds pretty anarchical.
Podcasting is complete anarchy.
Anarchy?
There are
complete anarchy. That'd be interesting to Howard.
It's anarchy in that there's no one saying this is what a podcast is.
Yeah.
There's no one saying what the rules of podcasting is. You can have a podcast devoted to one's own sexual exploits. Or you can have a podcast...
Good God.
Yeah, mine would be very boring.
Yeah, well,
or you could have a podcast devoted to one's love affair of literature.
Yeah.
Or one's desire to talk about the financial technologies of today.
Yeah.
Or one about Bitcoin, which I'm still learning about.
They got that new one coming now. I forget what it's called, but it's something else.
These virtual
There's something that's going to be in cover for Bitcoin. And that thing, whatever happened to that thing where they had the thing where they were charging for Bitcoin. The ransom was going to be
yeah,
Bitcoin.
well, I don't know what happened with that.
What happened? It went away after a couple
I'm on
of
a
days.
Mac, so I've never been hit up by that stuff.
Oh, right, okay.
Thank gosh.
Yeah. Now, anyway, I still feel like we're getting away from, let's say, your studio. You have a studio here right near Times Square.
Yeah, right on 50th
and
7th,
you can do audio massaging and improving. And what's that? It's an art form that you're involved in.
It is.
Let's talk a little bit about, we're talking all these other issues.
So I've been blessed to work with some amazing talent.
Yeah.
On air, I've produced for some national shows. Excuse me, the former governor of New York, I was his radio producer for a time. I produced national political talk shows. But
did you have an ongoing narrator or something?
Different hosts, yeah, different hosts.
They would be
the hosts, and I would be supplying the content. Today, let us talk about X, Y, and Z.
So you were there engaging them in a conversation?
Yeah, about what...
You were playing the role like I'm supposed to be playing
pretty
with
much.
you. Yeah.
But I wasn't interviewing them. I was telling them who they should be interviewing.
Oh, wait a minute. That's pretty easy. Ladies and gentlemen, we have this program. I introduce to you Mr. Schmuck. Go! And then he talks for an hour?
But,
or, there's something more than that.
Well, there's a lot more than that. There's a lot more than that. So I worked at a left-leaning political radio network.
Lefty.
I am proud to be a lefty. So I worked at a left-leaning political radio network that no longer exists. So my job was to find stories and guests compelling enough to that audience.
Well, that's like a producer. And
that's exactly what I was.
Yeah. Well, that's what I do.
That's exactly what you. You are a curator of conversations.
Since the Dark Ages. Yeah.
You're a curator.
Yeah, I guess
you are a librarian.
Well, I guess.
No, but you are.
Yeah.
Look at the list you showed me a list before I came in here.
I got about 3,000 hour-long programs.
And
they're
how
up
do you
on
determine?
YouTube.
How do you determine who to have?
I got certain ideas and everything. I put them down on a website. I got ideas about how, and I think we're coming to the end of the Homo sapien experience. We're coming into a new relationship in universe. We're going through a birth.
A rebirth.
Of consciousness in the universe that we happen to be born into after 10,000 generations. We've been here about 200,000 years, and we're coming to the end of a period of evolutionary development that includes Homo sapien, and we're going to come into a new relationship to the universe, a liberated relationship of extended consciousness to the universe, where everybody's going to be able to be a have on their own terms and participate in a gigantic jam session of the spheres that's going to interaccommodate us to the universe at a level transcendent to what we've been throughout the evolutionary process. So that is a lot of room.
There's a lot of room to grow,
different people, but that's what I think, that's what I'm attempting to do, and I believe in public access because it's there, and it's not a business thing, it's for people who have ideas.
And that
don't fit into the market.
And that is exactly why I started my podcast studio.
Really, there's a maybe there's a cooperation here we could work out.
We'll see. Well, but you're not for profit. I have rents.
Well, you see, that's the main thing that's motivated the whole business cycle.
But I will say this:
couldn't you get it to where everybody's just doing what they want to do and not have to be getting a return on it?
I would. But we live in a society that has these anchors you talked about.
That's the big thing we'd have to get over. How in the hell are we going to end it? Robots are coming.
Break up those 7%.
No, the robots are coming, and it's an extension of the information technology, and it's going to replace labor in the productive process.
Absolutely.
So the labor theory of value that's informed your left, fella.
Yeah.
That's what informs it. It's everybody working hard. Everybody got a job. Then you go out and you have a sense of responsibility, and you get money for what you do. It's called a wage.
Yeah.
And they're going to be undercutting that by the technology being able to replace labor input like you did on the tomato farm.
That's exactly
Would you like to have been back there in the sun and having it back?
Absolutely not.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're going to be replaced. So therefore, there's not going to be money in the hands of the mass of the people to clear the market of the good things that can be done.
But you.
We're in a big, and that dilemma is the one that's being confronting us all.
But you mentioned the left's labor problem, but the right also is trying to convince the miners that those mining jobs are going to come back.
Yeah.
Those mining jobs are gone.
That's who wants to go down in a mine? That's what they had to do. And the reason people had to do that kind of stuff, get down in the sewer and slop around, it was because they were starving. And they were like serfs and they were like peasants. And they had to do it because there was not nearly enough. You had to build up a structure. We're getting up now to where we can get a better, good life for everybody We have the technological extended We've transcended material scarcity as an ontologic reality, and the world is not caught up with the idea that there is enough for all, and they don't have a system that can provide, because they've got all caught up with wage slavery and the kind of principles of economic theorizing that you got to make money at what you do.
Right.
You might not have to do that. You might only have to just do a jam session.
There is so much abundance in this country.
Thank you. No, in the world.
In the world, but
unprecedented.
But the access to that abundance
is all held up because it has to have a market to it.
So if you look at some struggling countries in Africa, you look at North Korea. Perfect example, where they're
that guy
starving, literally starving,
awful.
Blackouts consistently, lack of power. Now, why is that? Because he has closed off. He controls access to everything within his own, and the people, for the most part, we are told, love him for it.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. It looks awful totalitarian.
Of course it does. Of course, to you and I, because we have an enlightened.
They did that for Hitler at a long time in the country of Germany for a while, and everything. But okay.
So it's the access to abundance that needs. We all need access.
Well, they're going to. You know Piketty?
I do not.
He's the economist, the French. All of the economic theorizings from John Maynard Keynes and in the Depression and Schumpeter and Karl Marx and all of the theorizing and the guys at the banks, the hedge fund guys and all of that, they're all now in one way or another cottoning on to this young fellow out of France. He's about 25 or something, and they're all saying he's right on the money in terms of what the hell's going on, because a lot of people are just reading the old script and they're not thinking of something new. And his whole point is they're undercutting it, and that they're undercutting the way in which the masses of the people have money in their pocket to buy what can be produced of the good life. They don't have a way of distributing buying power to the masses of the people, and now they got robots coming that are going to undercut even them, as they will line up to be a wage slave or a serf. I'll be a serf, I'll be a good servant, and I'll make money for you. And that's not going to work. So you're not going to have an ability, you're going to have an ability that's going to go latent, because there's no money in the people's pocket to clear the market. And that principle is getting around.
Well, look, you have the sharing economy today, right?
Well,
you have a sharing economy. So right now on my smartphone, I have 3 different taxi services, if you will.
Uber?
Uber, Lyft, and Via.
What's Lyft?
Lyft is like
I've never heard of it.
Those are other ones.
You're out ahead of the curve.
Well, I don't think so, but
no.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And each one of them gives me a different rate for the same exact ride.
That's competition.
That's competition.
There should be competition.
And that gives me the power.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, as the producer, as the consumer.
As the consumer. So I think more and more.
But you got to have money in your account to pay the consumer fee.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And so we got to get money to people. How are we going to get money to people when they're not needed as a wage slave?
I'm going to say something very unpopular.
Okay, do by all means.
We've got to tax the super wealthy, higher taxes, a flat tax or whatever that is, and cut down those loopholes that allow.
You like Bernie?
I'm a big fan
love
of Bernie.
I'm a huge fan. I mean, he's an old commie or something, you know. And that's one way to go. That's one way that some people, particularly on the left, see. Tax the bastards, right?
And it's taxing in that.
But
we have, again, it goes back to we have one society. We have our society.
Yeah. Well, are you talking the world or the country?
I'm talking. We can only control what we can control.
Who's we?
As Americans, we can only control.
Yeah, but we're also citizens of the world. You want to put it in a larger context or a small context?
I think talking in America is a large context in and of
Well,
itself.
That's true.
Just with the buying power of America, and I think if we lead by example, slowly but surely, the rest of the world. I think it's foolish for us to think that in our lifetime we're going to see solutions to some great big problems.
I think that's exactly what we have to think. That's exactly what we have to think. If you're a baby in the womb, do you remember being in the womb?
Clearly not.
No. Well, you're in a womb, you're about to leave.
Right.
You don't want to leave, because it's warm and whatever and everything.
Safe and
but
food.
We're leaving history, the fetters of an outdated historical context that is being matured into a new way of being, and that's what is the responsibility of thinking human beings.
Right. And
how are we going to handle that? Piketty says we have to get some way of tying. The left would like to do away with the private sector. they're all a bunch of crooks. They're stealing from one another, stealing from us, they got $880 million out of health care for the poor. And they're going to give a big tax cut to the rich. It's just announced today.
Yes,
they're going to give $880 billion more to the rich and take it away from the people who need the shot to save the baby's life. Now, that's not a very good idea.
No, that's backwards thinking. But it also is, I mean, I can get conspiratorial on you, but I also think there's a part of that that's very calculated to keep the poor poor and the wealthy wealthy.
Yeah.
I think
it's been the history of the human species.
If there is a system that's been successful for the wealthy at marginalizing those with disadvantages.
Yeah.
And I think they're very content on keeping
But
that
hasn't
system
there been some progress?
Clearly.
How would you like to live in a Cro-Magnon cave? And all you happen to come across a rock that you can hit something, and and the wolves are at the door, and
look back
it
at
must
the time
have been
of
a horror.
Look at back at the time of Lincoln and using mercury as a form of medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at that now, and that just seems barbaric.
Yeah, but now what about ahead? And it's moving so fast. It's moving so fast, and we're coming down to in the pregnancy. There's a quickening. There's a quickening. We're in quickening time.
Yes.
In terms of, I don't know, a lady would know more, because and everything, but it like that. I think that's what's required. You got to have some alternate way to get buying power. You don't do away with the private sector, but you finance things in a way that brings people all in on the earning power of the material world and the assets that make up the world. You have to bring everybody in on that in an ownership way,
I think
which will give a way of distributing, which will be one way of distributing buying power to the masses, which is the big challenge before us, so we can all get to the one that can tap into the sufficiency and the overwhelming abundance of what the future is now making available to us at a level of capability.
I agree with you, and that goes back to what I was saying
now
about
back to the audio.
Okay, back to the audio.
How do we get to the audio?
Okay, here's how we'll go with it. Okay, we'll talk about this.
Yeah. We got 15 minutes.
We got 15 minutes, real fast. So I was offered, as I said, I was at a left-leaning liberal talk radio network nationwide, and I was offered a job to work at a right-leaning political, doing the same thing, producing.
That'd be an interesting example. That'd be an interesting adventure.
And I slept on it for a week, and ultimately I could not do that for myself.
Couldn't do it. Right?
Could not do that for myself. So I said, how can I be a part of a solution where your voice and the Donald Trumps and the Republicans in the South and the liberals in San Francisco, how can I be a part of a solution where everyone's voice can be heard?
Thank you. That's exactly what should be asked.
So that is what I started Hangar Studios on with the help of my ex-wife, who I was in this job at a radio network, and I was miserable. Now, I had my own company, Hangar Studios, was a baby. It was an infant.
That was here in New York?
Here in New York. And we didn't actually have a studio space. We always rented out studios for clients.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
And it was an infant. And I remember one day I went to work, and my ex-wife, who's my business partner, looked at me and she said, "You are not the man I married. You're just miserable. Quit this job." And I said, I need that. These were the 2 years I worked.
Yeah.
And I said, I need this job. I need this job. We have kids. She says, "We'll figure it out."
Yeah. Wow.
That was very lo and behold, we figured it out, and we created a space at the company where everyone can come in, be respected of their conversation of what they want to talk about, and have access to distributing their message to the masses.
And you can improve it with the engineering skills of
sound.
the audio.
Exactly.
You appreciate the importance of the sound.
It has to sound good because podcasting,
Yeah.
unlike traditional radio.
Yeah.
Now, you and I grew up on traditional radio. How did we hear our radio? There were two speakers in front of us, maybe one speaker in front of us, and that sound was broadcast to us.
Yeah.
It was pushed to us. Podcasting is completely different.
Okay.
For the most part, I'd say 90% of all podcasting audio, the sound, comes in the form of these little earbuds.
Yeah.
These little headphones that we're putting in our ear.
Yeah, I see them in people's ears all over the place.
That is an intimate listening experience.
Yeah, right, okay.
That and even
a lot
now,
of them are white.
There are iTunes, Apple.
Can they be really good quality?
It's fantastic.
It's such a little thing.
Fantastic.
You can have quality in small packages.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially with that.
Yeah, miniaturization is important in terms of audio.
Of our future.
Yeah, of our future.
We can talk about that another time. But
elegance of design. Yeah.
So we are ingesting, we are listening to podcasts in the ear. Now, when I did a traditional radio show, I was broadcasting to, hey, all of you out there.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Our show right now, hey, thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yeah.
The podcasting is thank you for listening. It is to the one. Because you are creating a one-on-one conversation with your listener. That person listening to the podcast is the only person in that moment listening to it.
Can there be a number of people listening all at the same time?
Absolutely, but they're all listening on a one-on-one basis.
I'll be damned. Okay, that's interesting.
So it's all one person taking in that material.
Wouldn't it have been the same if everybody had a radio in house one, radio in house two? It would have been
but
on
even
an
still,
individual
that
basis.
sound
Yeah.
could be picked up by somebody walking by.
Yeah.
That
I see.
podcast
Yeah,
is
yeah.
you're broadcasting into somebody's head.
Yeah, right.
And in doing so, you're given some responsibility.
Yeah.
The responsibility is be 100% authentic.
Yeah.
You are talking into somebody's cavity.
Yeah.
You have to be 100% authentic. Because if you're full of it, that audience member, that one person is going to know they're being somebody, they're
If
putting
you're
on a
not
show.
authentic,
If you're inauthentic.
we're looking for authenticity in
has
the
to be
sound.
authentic. Yes.
And the authenticity
In the
of
message.
of the message.
Yes.
But the authenticity of the technical quality of the sound is important,
It's
and we
vital.
overlook it too much
We overlook
without
it.
paying enough attention to how important that is in terms of the overall authenticity of what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
100%.
And people in the business or in that kind of thing should be more aware of it, and they
Yes.
should be able to come maybe to your place, your studio. What's it called?
the Hangar Studios.
The Hangar Studio,
Yes.
right in Times Square,
Right in
practically,
50th,
right in
right, yeah.
the center of the whole thing. And you can help them out with improving that relationship with
Right.
the iPod people
We
who
can
are
do
listening to them.
everything.
Now, what can you do to improve, or what? Talk about
Yeah.
the improvements that can be done with the technology that makes that possible.
The first
now.
things first is creating and capturing good sound.
With sound, see, I take it for granted, you
Yes.
know, which I'm ignorant.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think, but I wouldn't say you're ignorant. I would say most people don't think about this because
Yeah.
this is not something they think about. You are only aware of sound
Yeah.
if the sound is bad.
Oh, that's interesting.
You're
yeah.
only aware of a bad video production or bad audio production if it's done
Well,
poorly.
video's different in a way. We're trying to talk about
Well, of
audio
course,
here.
but but
so it's
again,
a
but you're-
radio pod thing. It's
Yeah.
in your ear.
In
You're
your
not
ear.
seeing it. You're hearing.
You're hearing, and
but
you're
you
only-
can have a pod thing that has both audio and video.
You can, but those are like video podcasts or.
Now, is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Is
and there are
it
people that do it.
popular? Is it happening?
Not as much.
Is there a way of distributing video fair?
Yeah,
as
but
it is
it's
to
just like
be with-
YouTube. It's the same as YouTube. It's video on demand, just like YouTube. But why podcasting is so enticing right now to advertisers,
Yes.
to the public
okay.
in general.
This is a business model.
Oh
okay,
yeah, but
right.
why it's so enticing to people who have a story to tell.
Yeah.
We own multitasking, podcasting. Now, people are watching the show right now, and they're sitting in front of television.
Yeah.
They might be walking around, but for the most part, they are anchored to a set. Or
Yeah.
anchored to the
Right.
computer screen. They
Yeah.
are anchored to a screen.
Yeah.
We, as podcasting
Right.
and audio, do your
Yeah,
gardening.
right. No, I can dig it. Yeah,
Ride
right.
your motorcycle
Right.
or your exercise bike.
Yeah.
Put your son.
Get educated while you work.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
So we own all of that. We own that.
That's a lot.
We own that space.
Is that on a world scale? Is that
Absolutely.
happening all over the world?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Podcasting is taking.
So it'd be very important to try and get the best possible sound to that. And is there a big improvement, 1 to 100 thing, gauge, in what you can do technically with the sound, let's say?
What I can
I mean,
do.
that's really
yes.
important to get all the nuance of the timbre of the voice singing an opera or something, you know what I mean? But okay.
Yes, it's again using high quality microphones.
Yeah.
Using great systems in place.
Yeah.
Using a room that's silent. So we're in a room. We're not getting the outside bleed through. We are in Times Square, but you would never know you're in Times Square. You're not going to hear anything of Times Square.
Yeah.
So all of that is important because that's what's going to separate you from the guy who's doing that same podcast or that same content who's doing it in their living room.
Yeah.
And there are people who are doing podcasts in their living room.
And does it work? But
it can work great.
But yeah, it can work in your living room, but it's going to be maybe done better if it's done with this technical improvement of that. You can take a piece and improve the sound?
If it's done in yes. Now, if somebody records something poorly, we can restore it and try to fix that up. Absolutely.
There's a limit to what you can do.
But there's a limit to garbage in, garbage out. There's only so much you can fix.
So are there a lot of other, how big an industry is yours? Yours is audio massaging, audio
recording,
and all
producing,
that.
everything,
and
distribution.
improving. How big an industry is that? Who are your others that are doing that sort of thing?
There's a couple other studios in New York that do what we do.
Why aren't there more?
I'm glad there aren't, from a business standpoint, to then get my capitalist part on. I'm glad there aren't. I don't know why there's not more, but I think in time we're going to see more and more.
It's a big market, is it not?
It's a huge market. It's a huge market. The issue is coming into monetizing a podcast. How can we make money on the podcast?
Well,
how can a show host make money?
How does somebody make money on a podcast?
So there's about 3 or 4 different formats of podcasts that we do at the Hangar Studio.
Yeah.
So we have some where the hosts come in, record their show, we produce it, edit, distribute it, and there are commercials that play in that, just like traditional radio. So there's ad teams that go out and sell those commercial spaces on a podcast. There are other podcasts, however, where a company, we have a Fortune 100 company we work with that we do their podcast.
Yeah.
Now, nobody necessarily will ever listen to that podcast. But as a Fortune 100 podcast, company.
The people of the company could listen.
The people of the company could listen.
Internal communication.
But more importantly, it's more, the cost and entry for that company is so low that it is in their best interest to have a podcast to squat on that space. So if you were to look up this Fortune 100 company, and if they didn't have a podcast or somebody else is talking about their messaging, they will lose. So for them, they are literally having podcasts to own their own space and then control their own content.
And is that happening on a broad basis way?
Frequently, yes.
Yeah.
And then we have other people who use their podcasts as a means to an end. Now, you have your own talk show. You've been doing 3,000 interviews, right?
Forever.
So there are people who you want to talk to. Now, say if you take that same model and say, I want to be in business with X, Y, and Z.
That has never been very good in my consciousness.
For you, right. And it might not be your strategy.
I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't care about the money.
But for some, they will then say, I can't get a business.
I didn't want to have to care about it.
Right. But see, some people can't. Some people, again, have limitations to how far their reach can go. So you could try to set up a business meeting with person X at big global corporation. Yeah. Those I'm not going to take
They
that
only want to talk with somebody else that's in their league. Right. That's right. You got a lot of people like that.
But if I flatter you and I say to you, I really love your messaging, be a guest on my podcast. Now you and I are forming a relationship. And in that relationship, business is relationships. Business is enrolling people in your way of belief and thinking, I have a system of ideals that can benefit your business as well. But if you're not going to take that business meeting in the first place, and I know we're running up against it, you're not going to succeed. The podcast enables you to say, be a guest on my podcast, talk about yourself, and then form a relationship.
And come and see our company here, and we can improve that quality of that podcast that you're doing. And it's an important part of communication. You should be able to see that, and the top management of your company and your board of directors chairman should be able to see that as something that you have good business in trying to come over to our studios so we can help you improve your communication skills.
Every one of our 30-plus shows I'm extremely proud of. Each one of them, there's a piece of myself.
Are they listed on your site?
They're listed on the site at thehangarstudios.com. Hangar is spelled as an airplane hangar.
Yeah, right. Is that your name?
I named that myself.
Come up with that? That's pretty good.
I love aviation. I hate being a passenger on an airplane, but the concept of flight is just...
Do you fly? Do you fly yourself?
I've taken 3, thanks to my ex-wife. She was very generous, gave me 3 lessons. She bought for me lessons. It was the greatest gift I've ever, opposite of children.
Do you fly jets now?
No, just little Cessnas.
Little Cessna. But you like that, right?
I love it.
Do you jump out of airplanes with a parachute?
If the plane's working,
that's a different kind of thing.
If the plane's working, there's no need to jump.
Or you wouldn't jump off a mountain and skydive and rush down.
Doesn't excite me at all.
Yeah, I see all that. Well, listen, it's really good. Thank you very much for coming in. We could talk for 1,000 years.
I'm sure we could.
But we have to do it. Your pleasure to have the perception then of Chad Ho-Dougatz.
Ho-Dougatz, yes.
And he's got, as you can see on the studio, he's got a Hangar, Hanger studio. Happy to bring you those perceptions. Really the beginning of a beautiful friendship, let's hope. And we thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. So once again, thank you, Josiane, and thank you very much. Beginning of a beautiful friendship, one would hope.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. All right. Until next time. Well, there you got. That looks good, doesn't it? Look.
That's beautiful.
The mic, they float in air. They float in the air. I'll tell you the secret, everybody. We got a green screen here so that it looks like they're floating.
I know.
That's visual trickery, you know.
I like
you
that.
can do audio trickery too, huh? But that does not call it trickery. Let's say performance enhancement.
Enhancements.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. Audio enhancements.
All right. So I think we can stop talking. We don't have to think or talk.